Well, joining us now, a very special guest, Eylon Levy, the spokesperson for the Office of the Prime Minister of Israel. Mr. Levy, thank you very much for being with us. You are now operating Israeli forces in the heart of Gaza. Is this a prelude for a sustained occupation, at least of North Gaza, or is this an operation which will end and Israeli forces will come out in a period of time?
Israel is now moving into the Gaza Strip in order to go after the monsters who perpetrated the October 7th massacre and who right now are plotting another October 7th massacre. We're going after the whole of Hamas's terrorist and governing infrastructure inside the Gaza Strip to destroy it. Now, this is going to take a long time. Unfortunately, in the last 16 years that Hamas has been controlling the Gaza Strip, it has embedded itself very deeply within civilian areas. It's built tunnels underneath people's homes. It has stored rockets and weapons inside schools. It has set up rocket launchers from inside mosques. And it has even set up its main military headquarters. How outrageous is this? Its main military headquarters underneath the Al-Shifa hospital. So it's going to take a while in order to get rid of Hamas, just as the world got rid of ISIS in Syria and Iraq. Now you're asking me about the day after Hamas scenarios. I wish the day after Hamas were next week. The day after Hamas is going to take a while. We're exploring several options for what that is going to look like. But the common denominator among all of them is this. The Gaza Strip will be completely demilitarized. The Gaza Strip will never again be used as a base to launch tens of thousands of rockets against Israeli citizens and to send death squads into Israel to burn, butcher, rape, torture and mutilate our people as they did on October 7th.
But to the point made by the US Secretary of State, Mr. Blinken, and to quote, there should be no reoccupation of Gaza after the conflict ends. Is that a position which Israel accepts in principle?
The Prime Minister has said that Israel will, unfortunately, need to exercise overall security control inside the Gaza Strip because we've seen what happens when it didn't have security control. I'll remind you, in 2005, nearly 20 years ago, Israel withdrew from the Gaza Strip. We didn't want it. We gave it to the Palestinians and said, good luck. We want you to build a prosperous region on the Mediterranean. And it was destroyed by Hamas, which turned it into a brutal terror state that attacked our people. Now, what that is going to look like the day after scenario, it's still very premature. It's still very premature because it is a long way off, but we're working together with our international partners, and we're going to have to establish a mechanism that will ensure that the Gaza Strip is never again used as a base for murderous attacks against us, like we saw on October 7th, and like we saw in the preceding 16 years.
You have now been conducting ground operations in the north of the Gaza Strip. What about the center of the Gaza Strip and the south of the Gaza Strip, which is extremely populated? When you talk about ensuring that Hamas is taken out across the Gaza Strip, does that mean you will be moving into the south as well? I ask because those are very habited areas presently.
At the moment, Israel is focusing its efforts on the north of Gaza because that is where Hamas has embedded most of its terror infrastructure. As I said, its main headquarters is located underneath the main hospital inside Gaza. But our goals have been clear. We will eliminate the entirety of Hamas's military and governing structure inside the Gaza Strip, all of it. Every Hamas commander, every Hamas fighter, every rocket launcher, every tunnel. We will not leave it any ability to hurt our people any longer. And in doing so, we're continuing to go above and beyond to keep civilians safe. I'll give you one example. Since encircling Gaza City, for 4 days now, Israel has operated a humanitarian corridor for residents in northern Gaza to move to the south to safer areas for their safety. We're glad that today, the 4th day in a row, thousands of people took advantage of that humanitarian corridor. And Hamas has attacked that humanitarian corridor. Hamas has been attacking the Israeli soldiers, keeping the civilians safe as they move south for their own safety. So we're making maximum efforts to keep civilians as safe as possible. We're going after the monsters who perpetrated October 7th, and we're doing everything we can to get non-combatants out of the way.
The hostage situation and the call made in some international quarters for a humanitarian pause. Does that work for Tel Aviv?
Israel is sick with worry for the fate of the 240 hostages inside the Gaza Strip. There are babies in there, orphans. We're doing everything we can to get them out. And one of the things we're doing is putting pressure on Hamas so that it will release our hostages. Now, no ceasefire is on the table without a release of our hostages. That will not happen. There will be no ceasefire without a release of hostages. Small tactical pauses, an hour here, an hour there, in order to get humanitarian aid in or individual hostages out. That's something we've done before. It's something we will consider again. But we will not consider any sort of ceasefire without a release of our hostages. We will continue with our goal of erasing Hamas so it can never perpetrate another October 7th massacre.
What about the leadership of the Palestinian cause? Is that the leadership of the Palestinian organization? Is that someone that Israel would potentially target as well, or certainly the leadership structure as it exists?
Our goal is to go after Hamas. We are going after Hamas. We're going after every monster who is responsible for the October 7th massacre, every monster who is plotting again to murder every man, woman, and child in our country. Because make no mistake, that is what Hamas is saying openly in every interview. They want to kill all of us. We're going after Hamas. That is the goal of this war.
You know, I must ask you this question because it's been reported, certainly here in India, that, and we have excellent relations with Israel, of course, but that there is a call, or there will be a call for Indians to work in Israel, to fill the roles which Palestinians had occupied or had in the recent past. Is this just a rumor? Are you hearing about this for the first time?
I'm not familiar with these reports. I'm afraid I have nothing I can comment.
Another question about, we were speaking about humanitarian corridors from the north to the south. What about corridors with the Rafah crossing? We've seen a steady inflow of humanitarian aid. Do you expect that to actually go up?
Yes, and humanitarian aid has been increasing through the Rafah border crossing with Egypt. There are two main questions. First of all, the capacity of the aid organizations inside Gaza to receive all of this aid and distribute it to civilians, and also our ability to screen the trucks to make sure that Hamas is not using it to smuggle weapons. That is our right and our obligation under international law. We need to facilitate the provision of life-saving humanitarian aid into Gaza as long as Hamas is not using it to rearm. And from the very first day, we've said we want humanitarian aid to reach civilians through the Rafah border crossing with Egypt, but Hamas must not exploit the international community's goodwill and the money that governments all around the world want to send to civilians in order to rearm and fill its military machine in the way that it has stockpiled fuel, it has stockpiled medicines, it has stockpiled food that it has taken away from civilians in Gaza and is preparing for a long and drawn-out war against our people. We will not allow that military machine to restock itself. We want the aid to reach the civilians.
All right, Eylon Levy, thank you very much for speaking to us. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much. Anytime.
The spokesperson for the Office of the Prime Minister of Israel over there telling us about the ground situation with Israeli forces now in the heart of northern Gaza.